Welcome back to the show. We're glad you're watching. It is Thursday, 7:11 a.m. Our discussion this morning focused on our counties. The devolution came into place, 2010 constitution after the election. We've seen the senators come into office, the governors, county assembly members as well. But quite a number of challenges. Some call them teething problems. Now it looks like it's a supremacy war. Who's the boss of who gets to do what, who can summon who. And we've seen, of course, several stories play out in the past week. This morning on set, I'm joined by Mohamed Guled, who's Deputy Governor, Isiolo County. We also have Johnson Osoi, who's a Speaker of Kajiado County Assembly. And at the extreme left, my extreme left, we have Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Makueni, Senator. Good morning. Thank you all for coming and being part of our show this morning. And let's begin with what we've seen unfold. First, with the Wambora situation from that impeachment. You know, the court orders that had been issued to the county assembly, not for that process not to continue, going to the Senate, the committee meeting, his impeachment. Now that has, of course, been suspended by the courts. Your thoughts in terms of this process and the arguments for and against. Where do you stand, Mutula?
Oh, that's a long question.
Loaded question.
It's general.
Yeah.
But let me be specific. First, some of these matters are in court, so I don't want to get into a lot of the details of the matters that are in court. But it's fair to say that towards the end of last year, there was this notion by most Kenyans that we, the senators, have nothing to do, or the Senate is not working. It's fair to say that we are now demonstrating that the Senate is a core part of devolution. And that's the reason you are seeing some of these things. And in terms of what you saw happening, most people do not know. Yeah. And it's fair I say so. This issue arose out of reports that were issued by the Controller of Budget and the provisions of Article 228, which require that every 4 months, the Controller of Budget is supposed to send a report of the way the money is being spent at counties to the National Assembly and Senate. Okay. That report that is now subject of discussion is actually the report of the first quarter. And it's just simply saying you have an issue here, deal with this issue, etc., etc. Under the previous provision, that is 228(4), the Controller of Budget has the discretion to issue funds. And that is why, for example, a county like Makueni, where we had an issue about whether the budget is balanced or not, the Controller of Budget only issued development funds when the county was ready. Right. The Senate has another mandate, which is fair that I ask, and I thought maybe as I am demonstrating this, your viewers will be looking at those articles of the Constitution. Article 96(3) is very clear, and it has 2 words, which I want everybody to memorize. The Senate has the right to determine allocation of national revenue to counties. That's 1. And 2, it oversees that national revenue. So in Article 228 and Article 296, you have 2 words, oversee and oversight by Senate. Right. And then you have the Senate having that mandate of oversighting how this money is spent. How the money is spent.
Senator, I want to stop you there because very shortly, in as far as Senate having taken over the process after recommendation of impeachment from the County Assembly in Embu, do you believe that was constitutional to have continued with that?
In terms of what?
After there was a court order stopping the process at the county level.
Yes.
But the Senate argued that they continued because there was a court order, but it was to the Speaker and not to the Senate to affect the impeachment process.
This court order is very controversial.
Okay.
But I never personally got to see it, and in fact, never brought out to. If you watch the debate, right, it was not brought to our attention at the time. The fact of the matter is that you will see that the Senate has got very qualified lawyers. By the time we went into the debate about this issue, I strongly believe that if that order was in the Senate or had been served or had been brought to our attention, that had already been considered. But I am saying that it was not brought to the attention of the Senate at the floor.
At the floor. Yeah. Let's come to Osoy and county assemblies and their role in all this. The governors now are saying, in terms of keeping them in check, it is not the senators, it is the county assemblies. What are your thoughts?
In agreeing with what Senator Mutula is saying, the Senate obviously has a role in oversighting the county governments. However, there is a very thin line between the role of the Senate and county assemblies in as far as oversight of public finance. If you look at the PFM Act, Public Finance Management Act, whereas the National Parliament, which is both houses, will oversight state organs in as far as public finance is concerned, the county assembly is tasked on oversight of executive organs at the county level. And I want to make it very clear that if you look at the articles, I mean the objects of devolution, Article 174, one of the objects of devolution, actually the first one, is that there must be democratic and accountable exercise of power. So I agree to a large extent that governors as well as assemblies or all organs of government must be accountable. But in ensuring that they are accountable, the role of the county assemblies must be very clear, and the Senate must not usurp powers of county assemblies.
Is it doing that now?
I think, I wouldn't want to say they are doing that now, but when the Senate comes down to operational levels, now to want to ask governors small expenditures on vouchers and all that, I mean, issues that would be done by, I think, a county executive in charge of finance, then I think the Senate...
So you're against those impeachments. You think those are small issues, it should not be going to the level of the boss of the county, should be other officials in the county government?
The executive authority of a county government rests on the governor and his executive committee.
Yes.
Which includes his deputy or her deputy and the executive committee members. But looking at the Wambora's case, the Senate did the right thing because the Senate did not generate the impeachment. So I agree with the impeachment, but it must not be, you know, like cracking a whip, because we all know that there has been, it is for me more of power play than anything else.
Okay, so two things here before I come to Guled. You're saying they're a bit contradictory. On one end, you say they did the right thing.
Yes.
On the other end, you say that on smaller issues of money, the governor should not have to account. And you say you termed them not so big an issue, but that is what the Senate committee will so take up the governor on. And his argument
what I would
was
like the Senate to and I will ask Senator Mutula, is if the Senate is going to, I appreciate that they have the powers. Senate committees can summon anybody. But then where is the line between the county assembly oversight role under Article 185, sub-Article 3, and that of the Senate, so that we avoid duplication of roles? That's all I'm saying.
I can answer the question very quickly.
Very quickly, because we need to bring in Guled, yes?
That's why I began with the reports of the controller of budget. The controller of budget, it's fair that everybody understands, and I appreciate what Mr. Speaker is saying. The controller of budget does not audit counties. He gives, the controller of budget gives you a formula and says, in this quarter, 25% of your expense went to travel, for example, and then raises a query. That report does not go to the county assembly. That report comes to the Senate every quarter. So we are talking about just the first quarter. And then at the end of that report, you have recommendations. They say, for example, there is a problem with IFMIS all over the counties. There's a problem with internal controls. There's a problem with capacity. There are about 7 recommendations. We as Senate are supposed to sit with our partners, governors, and ask, how do we check and ensure in the next quarter we're not having these problems? And there's a reason. As we speak, the budget for 2014-2015 is at our committee. How much money are we allocating to our counties is with us. There are queries about the last allocation. We are simply saying we are defending the counties to get more allocation this financial year. But you must come to us so that we plug in the system so that you don't have problems and hitches that are raised by the control of budget. As to the details, who bought a spoon, who didn't buy a spoon, why did they buy a tire? That's not our business.
That is not your business.
Yes.
I entirely agree, and that's actually the issue.
Okay, Deputy Governor, let's bring you in on this particular issue, because we've seen the summons that had been issued to 9 other governors that has been suspended by the courts because they moved to court. The Senate had initially requested or asked them to come. They did not, so it went to summons. And as far as this, because the Senate maintains it's about accountability, most governors feel it's becoming a witch hunt. What are your
my personal view is that leaders in this country should always be accountable. It is not about ego. It is not about how big you feel. I believe, let alone the Senate, if even a Mwananchi on the street stops you as a leader and tells you, how are your accounts? You are spending our money in a wrong way. That Mwananchi has a right to be heard. It's simple accountability. So I sometimes get worried when we leaders go around and we make it as if, now the situation that has come out of all this, and some of my colleagues refusing to appear for the summons, is that as if there's something being hidden, unfortunately. Okay. So I think that's my personal view.
So you support the Senate's position,
the Senate,
and what they're doing?
Or any other organ that feels they want to get an insight into the county accounts, whether they are even a simple NGO or any other group. I think we should be able to give them that opportunity without appearing as if something is being hidden. That is a simple accountability. I think what has now taken over is the issue of ego and the supremacy that we talked about. And I think that was not something that we envisaged in the Constitution. We had envisaged a horizontal government, a government that is not vertical, that is accessible, that is accountable, and that is able to account for all its mistakes.
Right. So, Mutula, you're checking, and you say as the Senate checking the governors. Who checks the Senate? Keeps them in check.
In terms of what are you checking?
Everyone executing their mandate needs to be accountable to somebody. They need to be able to report. They cannot just be working and going ahead with their affairs without being accountable to anybody, even if it's to the people of Kenya. Who is
checking
that
the Senate? Yes. Yeah, I'm happy with the question. And that is the reason why we are insisting that we are accountable to the people of Kenya for our role in protecting the interests of counties. Insofar as if we have the mandate of determining, and the word determining, even though in English supposes that you're making judgment, how much money every county should be allocated. We should therefore, at the end of or in the process of spending, this money is spent, be able to tell the country that we have supervised devolution, the funds allocated to counties, to ensure that your funds are well spent. There's another aspect that even the public ought to be aware. Other than this money that it goes to counties, where Isiolo, Machakos, Makueni gets a certain allocation, you have a fund called equalization. You have a fund called, under there's shareable revenue, and there's another fund which is called a conditional grant. All those funds are passing through the Senate and through the bill that we are going to pass for the year 2014-2015. So what we are simply doing is ensuring, because at the end of this, Kenyans ought to ask senators, what was your role in the allocation of these funds and in checking the oversight? And that is the reason why in conducting that discretion, the control of budget then consults the Senate and says, Senate, here you have. So in our part, it will be an abdication of duty if a report well prepared by taxpayers' money ended up in the Senate and we sat and said, let be merry and wait. There's no time to wait. Yes. So I believe that in the ultimate objective of having the Senate will not be achieved if we don't have a report of that nature and keep quiet about it. We are just telling Kenyans we are walking along devolution step by step to check what is happening.
But you know, as you say, to check what is happening, the concern that's coming up and why people talk about it as a witch hunt is some of the submissions and presentations made by senators in the Senate, in as far as now they're going for their governors as well. They should all know, their time is coming. So it wasn't, it came across as just, it's all about
I know, but that
a witch hunt
yes,
and not accountability.
And somebody even said that, siku za mwizi and whatever. Many comments have been made.
Right.
But if you attend the meetings of my committee in finance, we have not gone beyond what the controller of auditors, the controller of budget has said. When the governor of Kitui, Governor Malombe, came to see us, and is the only governor who has come to the Senate so that we can discuss that report, they even came with an explanation. They said we had a problem with internal controls. There was a problem with transitional authority at some point. This report is not correct because of 1, 2, 3 things.
But you will not refute, Senator, there are those who are witch hunting. For them, it's not about accountability, it's about who is in control. As much as you say that, because it's clear from submissions made, you would not at least argue for all of them and say they all are on the same path.
Yeah, but it's fair, Sophia, I say, that Senate is acting as Senate whore. If a person is carrying a personal vendetta, they will carry the personal vendetta in a manner that will be personal.
Okay.
But the law, insofar as the Senate is concerned, we will be acting as a collegiate. When a governor comes to us, we represent the Senate. If they come to the committee, we are representing the Senate. If a person has a personal thing that they want to deal with the governor, they will deal with it outside the parameters of the law.
Of the Senate.
So the governors should rest easy that the law protects every process that we are dealing with.
All right, let's come to the speaker very shortly, in as far as when you first came into office, it was all about the pay. You wanted an increase in pay and criticized heavily by Wananchi, for first thinking about pay before even working. And now the concern with what has happened in Embu is that there's a form of empowerment with the county assemblies, that now they could even manipulate, they could even blackmail to get some of their needs, interests met. If not, then they initiate those kind of processes. Those kind of concerns have been raised.
I would say any county assembly or county assembly members who would use the case of Embu to try and blackmail the executive clearly do not know their role. There is a concept of separation of powers.
Yes.
And the county assemblies, on the other hand, must not now come out and feel that for every little disagreement with the executive at the county level, impeachment process. Any speaker who would admit such a motion without clearly founded allegations, which are founded in law, before taken to the Senate, would actually be wrong. So I would say,
so there's no need to worry.
Assemblies, there is no need to worry. We are sober enough, and I want to say that we want devolution, and are determined to make sure that devolution works. But my issue really is with the Senate. In the last 1 year, we barely engaged with the Senate, except the Committee on Devolution. We have seen the National Assembly, the Committee on Parliamentary Accounts Committee, come out to try and engage county assemblies the committees on public accounts at the county assembly to try and train and build capacity. But the Senate has not been that active, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
Until the Wambora case came.
Yeah, because initially they were trying to figure out
for the Senate, it was like a wake-up call. It was time to show governors who the boss is, and that is what came out.
Come on. You know, Sophia,
that is what came out.
You know, it's where the public are not misrepresented. Because the Wambora case came to the Senate early this year.
Yes.
We have been working even last year. And the question of capacity and engaging all county assemblies has been there. Maybe you do not follow our debates, but you should follow our debates, because we have already passed a motion at the Senate for the building of capacity at all levels at county assembly. We have, because that is also the mandate of national government. We have engaged them. This report that led to this push and pull was at the Senate last year. By the time we were inviting my good friends, the governors, to come and sit with us so that we talk about capacity as one of the aspects identified by the controller of budget that needs to be uplifted so that counties don't have this problem with budgets, everybody said, no, I will not come there because you're going to ask me about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. So I want to correct him and say that we have in the past been engaging governors. Council of Governors has come to my legal committee several times to discuss about capacity.
All right, let me bring Deputy Governor in, because do you feel this is a wake-up call for governors who, as well, when they first came into office, it was about the big cars, the excellency, the titles, the flags hanging them. A lot of it seemed like attention was shifted from serving Mwananchi development agenda to just, you know, I'm the boss now. But now this wakes them up to the reality that they do need to be very careful in as far as how the money is being spent and what it is they're doing. Do you feel it's a wake-up call for,
I think it's a wake-up call. The issue of the case of Embu has taught us a lot of things. It has taught us also the anomalies in the Constitution. For example, you remember when the governor was being impeached, his deputy was also impeached along the way.
Right.
The poor lady was just lynched for a mistake that she never committed. That has brought to the forefront also, for example, the role of the deputy governors in the county government, because up to now the Constitution has not been very clear on that.
How so?
The only role that has been ascribed according to the Constitution to deputy governors is that he deputizes the governor.
You're a deputy chief executive.
You're a deputy chief executive, period, and nothing more than that. So you are going to play at the whims of the governor. If he doesn't allocate you any more responsibility beyond that, then you only get lynched again at the county assembly when now matters of impeachment comes for mistakes. Of course, now in the Embu case, my colleague Dorothy Nditi, who is now actually the Embu governor, except for the court case yesterday, was brought along. And then we have even seen lack of cooperation from our colleague governors in that regard. You remember even when the governor went to court, he left out the deputy governor. It was a very sad thing to do for the governor at that time. And later on, when the whole issue was finished, the issue of now the whether she could assume the office also was raised. So a lot of issues have come out of this that now we are beginning to learn. And I think the Senate should also correct those anomalies.
So do you feel for your county, Isiolo County, your governor, is he engaging you now that you deputize him? How is your relationship working?
I think it is not something peculiar to Isiolo alone. It's a countrywide. I am also the vice chairman of Deputy Governors Forum, other than being a deputy governor. So I am now talking on behalf of all my colleagues. So it's a situation we are facing across the country.
So most of them feel they don't have much to do?
Most of them feel they don't have much to do. And not only that, but also they're not being engaged in the most important decision-making processes in the county. And that's a sad thing, because this is also a political office. It's an office that helped the governor get that position. And now, but because of the anomaly and ambiguities within the Constitution, suddenly we received on the receiving end of now all the, what is, let's say, the negatives and the disadvantages. But when it comes to the benefits, in fact, deputy governors have never been heard talking about salaries. We don't run flags. In fact, we are so humble. And we have even been forgotten even in the issue of salaries. So And we did that consciously, knowing that being elected officials, we need to be humble.
Okay.
We need to be accessible.
Can I say something?
Yes.
You see, the Constitution cannot have everything. The Constitution is an expression of what is supposed to happen, and the details are contained in various other laws. The Constitution is very clear as to how a county should run. And I'm pleading with deputy governors to go back to the articles of the Constitution beginning with 174, 175, because it says that the county is run by a county executive committee comprising of a governor, a deputy governor, and all the CECs in place. It supposes, using what Embu did, that they looked at it from a collegiate perspective, and they said, since you are county executive and you have everybody else, all of you must go home. But you see, the other thing that I wanted to mention to Deputy Governor and yourself, you must give Senate credit where credit is due. When the Deputy Governor of Embu was impeached on allegations here and there, it came to us, and when we investigated, we found nothing. When it came
she was cleared.
When it came to Wambora, there were 5 counts, we found 3. Nobody gives us credit for doing our work, but the point of the matter is that I've had the arguments about the deputy governors, but the Constitution is clear as to what is supposed to happen, so that then you do not need to say, if the governor's role is to sign a check, the deputy governor's role is also to sign a check. It would be superfluous to do something.
Senator, I think, let me just reply to that. That's not what we are referring to. We are referring to a positive contribution towards the process of devolution and county government. Right now, what's happening is that all the powers are vested in the office of the governor. So that brings you in a subordinate position. And then it becomes a question of whether there's magnanimity from the governor. You are now left at the pleasure and the goodness, whether you're in good terms. But that should not be the case.
Let me say something.
Clear description of roles.
At the point of election of governor and deputy governor, and that is why you are not elected. You were selected by the government.
I disagree.
But elected because they're the ones who take over. We don't go to a by-election after.
Let me say this.
Elected.
Because then we'll be going to a by-election.
On the ballot, the governor picks their deputy, and then they are elected together.
Yes.
The law assumes, therefore, that in their election, when they get into government and elected, then therefore they will make those arrangements. It's not magnanimity. You see, you have come in by one ticket for 2.
That assumption now is not working. The law assumed, but the assumption is not working.
So there needs to be clarity in law what your role is.
Do you want deputy governors elected? To go on the ballot and campaign?
Maybe not, but
perhaps not. Let's bring you in here. The biggest issue here I hear from him is that they just want clarity.
I agree with the senator that the executive authority of a county government does not rest in the office of the governor as a person.
As a person.
It rests on the executive, which comprises of the governor, the deputy governor, and the county executive committee members.
Exactly.
So, and I think this is where we got wrong from the word go.
Yes.
Even with governors themselves.
Yes.
Because when they came to office, they could not distinguish between an office of governor and the person.
Exactly.
The person, the governor, and the office were synonymous, such that with big titles and spending money without due regard to law, I'm not saying they have done that. It's subject to investigation, but I think that is what is coming out.
Okay. There's a question here coming from Anderson Mutula Kilonzo on what has been happening in Makueni. You had in Machakos County, I beg your pardon, the Machakos governor, of course, following again the auditor, the report that has come out and the spending of the money, and there was, of course, the issue of the funeral service of your late father, God rest his soul in peace. What your thoughts are? That's what Anderson is asking. And as far as the argument he's made so far, the money that was spent, about 2 million shillings from Machakos County in Makueni County.
I've not actually heard
what he's had to say.
No. I mean, the country must forgive me if I don't want to get into the details as to about my late father. But let me say this: a lot of people contributed in many ways, including yourself, even when you were at home. None of these people, family members or committee, were asking, okay, where did you get this money from? The point where the governor of Machakos is being asked as to why he did X, Y, Z, I cannot answer. But if it is a query, and I've read part of the report which says that somebody must be surcharged, it is the persons who are in charge of accounting, and I'm talking about the Auditor General, to confirm whether or not, if it is confirmed the money was withdrawn the way it was withdrawn, it violates the law. The law must take its course. That is would be my response to it. Not to get into the details as to whether it was $1 million or $2 million. The fact of the matter is that if there is a query, a legal query, it must be answered legally. And there must be legal responsibility for it if it is found to have been done. To have been an issue. Exactly.
Okay. All right. The conduct of the county assembly members in Embu County, talking about this court order that had been outstanding, because that's where the biggest problem has come from. Do you think they conducted themselves right?
Well, I don't have details of the court order. But I want to say that county assemblies, just like any other organ of government, is keen to respect court orders. We will uphold the concept of separation of powers, but I don't have details as to when this court order came into the county assembly and whether it was to serve the county assembly or the speaker. But and I think that is really the point of determination.
The general public, as far as this court orders were served.
And I think what the court is going to look at, or I expect them to look at, is not whether the county assembly and the Senate had powers to impeach a sitting government governor, but rather whether the process was followed in terms of whether there was that court order that was disregarded, if at all. And I think that is the point at which the courts would be helping to.
An interesting thing is that as all this is going on, personally, being a practicing lawyer and having developed the law in many respects, in terms of many aspects of the law, the governor was given an opportunity, and he presented his case continuously before the Senate. So did the deputy governor, so did the county assembly. So I'm curious myself as a legal practitioner to hear what the court will say about the process, because when you talk about a fair hearing, etc., that person presented. So I would like to myself to hear the interpretation of the court insofar as the process is concerned, the paperwork is concerned, the hearing is concerned, so that then we can determine, other than the issue as to whether or not you are not supposed to hear me at that point.
But you know what is interesting, just to take you up on that, even with the issue of summons and moving to court to block that for the governors, one of the reasons cited in the judgment by Judge Ngugi was that the senators did not show up in court. They were not there. So we're talking about separation of powers and just having that respect of this entity and the other. That is one of the grounds that when it's an issue that touches on you and the senators don't even bother to show up, that in itself shows you don't...
You know, I've heard that from you.
It's very clear.
I'm hearing it from you.
Yes.
I don't know what they mean they were not present or to respond. I attempted not to get involved in the details of it. The fact is, the question is whether or not we responded to whether or not there ought to be an injunction on the issue of whether we should issue summons or not. I believe that that has been stopped temporarily, if the procedure is the way I understand it, and therefore as to the legal validity of the summons, it is what then the Senate will respond, so that the court can interpret Article 125. I am interested in hearing what the court will say insofar as the word any person can be summoned under Article 125. It's fair game.
The other issue, Senator,
yes.
what I don't know is whether the court can injunct also. The Senate.
That is what I'm talking about.
What the law says about that.
About the same.
That is what I'm explaining as to whether or not where we have power equivalent to the High Court under Article 125, and we summon a person, whether you can issue an injunction against
For
that.
For example, what is now at play
is
what will happen now in case governors now refuse to appear for the summons.
Exactly.
Are they going to be now arraigned in court again? You know, I think this is also an issue we have with ambiguity within the law.
And as we wind up, I want to give you each an opportunity to comment on this, because with the whole of this conversation, the biggest concern, and as a general public just watch this play out, is we have the judiciary, and then now talking about the county assembly, the Senate comes in, the county assembly, and the governors, and of course the deputy governors alongside. So in terms of who does what, where the power reaches, because we're seeing people work, at the end this is overturned, so it looks like there's a lot of very sticky issues and lack of clarity in as far as how certain processes should work. Is this part of, do you feel, teething problems, or who is not doing the right thing, so that we see decisions being reversed and it becomes this vicious cycle with everybody now maintaining? We now have members of parliament criticizing the judiciary, that they are not respecting that separation of powers. So in terms of this war we find ourselves, this position that Kenya is in now, is it one that needs clarity, or what do you feel is needed to resolve the situation?
I think there is a lot of, as I said, ambiguity also in the law. For example, the Senate vis-a-vis the National Assembly, who is supreme? We don't know. We get directions from both houses. Who is superior, the courts or the houses of the parliament, or the county assembly for that matter? Who is above the other one? So there's a lot of lack of clarity. I think the Supreme Court must step in, because we could be wasting a lot of time, as you said, in that vicious cycle. Because if everybody can go to court and stop a case, and then another one comes and stops the same case,
the other one holds the other one in ransom.
The whole day we could spend maybe months dealing with one issue. So I think it's an issue of interpretation, and that interpretation, among others, also the issue I raised on the issue of deputy governors. Supreme Court needs to step in and clarify what the law says on these matters, particularly also on whether deputy governors can be impeached in the first place, because the law is also not clear on that. We have requested even for that to be clarified, and a lot of other things also.
Finally, sir.
Whereas there are a lot of ambiguities in law on what the deputy governor is talking about, I think the starting point would be to ensure that all those tasked with responsibilities try to do whatever we have to do within the confines of the law. And I want to sum it by saying that any public officer, whether state officer or public servant, is not authorized to do anything except that which is expressly authorized in law. And the difference with the citizens is that people on the streets, or those we lead, are allowed to do whatever they wish except that which is expressly prohibited by law. So if everybody does the right thing, or within the confines of the law, I think we will have lesser problems. On the issue of separation of powers, I agree that the courts need to interpret. There are a lot of ambiguities. If you look at statutes like the County Government Act, a lot of things that need to be looked at. Some offices actually at the county level don't exist, like the office of the Deputy Speaker does not exist. The clerk of the county assembly may recommend to County Public Service Board promotions and establishment of offices, and those things are not workable on the ground. So they are actually lacunas, legal lacunas.
All right. Finally,
I would be very, very hesitant to criticize courts. We must, as a country, allow any person who feels they have a judicial issue that they need to present to court, taken to court. What we as Kenyans must demand, so that we can have a way forward, is that this issue should be determined quickly. But we must allow these processes to go to court. We must allow even ourselves as leaders to have an interpretation of some of the issues of the things that we determine when we sit in the Senate or National Assembly.
Right.
Because as Senate, we have in our report found that the rules that apply to the impeachment of a governor are the same as the rules that should be applicable to deputy governors. Now, that is an area of law that I would like to see a judicial interpretation. Question of standard of proof and as to what constitutes gross abuse of the Constitution. We have made a finding as Senate, but we want an interpretation so that going forward, everybody knows this is where you go. In terms of the law and lacunas, when I sit with the forum of speakers, and their chairman is a good friend of mine, we as Senate have been waiting for memorandum from counties where you say, senators, we have an issue with this. For example, there's an issue with all counties as to debts that were incurred by the previous municipal councils or town councils, etc., etc. Who is handling that issue? It is the Senate. So that then we can have a way forward. They are complaining, yet we are seated people who are qualified in doing these things so that we can address them as legal issues. To answer the deputy governor, it's fair to say that the provisions insofar as who is superior or not, as far as National Assembly and the Senate is concerned, is an argument that should be taken to a place other than a Senate and a Parliament. Why? Because you see, please, it's an argument that can be discussed somewhere under a tree. But the point is, most people do not remember that the Supreme Court has issued an advisory opinion on the question of division of revenue bill between Parliament and the Senate. They have said we have a role to play because we wanted counties having to be given more allocation.
Right.
So it's fair to say as a last point that allow any Kenyan, any person out there in the village, in Makueni or any other place, to go to the nearest court possible. And I want every county to have a high court so that they can interpret all these provisions insofar as what these people are doing at the county level, not at national level.
All right, thank you. Gentlemen, definitely issues that need clarity. That's what I pick from get from this discussion this morning, but we appreciate you all being with us this morning. Mutula Kilonzo, Junior, who's Senator Makueni, and Johnson Osoy, Speaker, Kajiado County Assembly, Mohammed Guled, who is Deputy Governor, Isiolo County, being with us this morning. Devolution, a conversation, of course, that does not stop here. We continue online, and of course those stories that are developing, we continue to watch how they will continue to develop in coming days, and we'll keep you posted on all the details right here on KTN.